He was just a 12-year-old boy chasing his basketball. But one phone call turned his life upside down. Police showed up. Neighbors stared. And before he could even speak, he was treated like a criminal. What no one knew. His mother was the most powerful woman in the state, and she was on her way. What happened next silenced an entire neighborhood. It all started with a phone call that never should have been made. "I'm telling you, there's a black kid causing trouble in my yard." The woman's voice was sharp, laced with urgency and suspicion. Her grip on her phone was tight, her knuckles white as she paced back and forth by the window. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look twice. She didn't consider context or common sense. She just assumed. And in just minutes, the quiet suburban street was lit up with flashing red and blue. Sirens wailed through the stillness of the afternoon, cutting through the calm like a warning bell no one asked for. In the middle of it all stood Ethan Carter, 12 years old. Pale-faced, wide-eyed, and frozen. His fingers wrapped tightly around a worn-out basketball, one he'd owned for years. He stood next to a police car, confused, heart-pounding, surrounded by a small but growing crowd of curious neighbors peeking out from windows and porches. Some whispered. Some just stared. But none of them, not yet, truly understood what was happening. But let's rewind and ask the question, why was Ethan even there? Ethan and his mother had just moved into the neighborhood a few weeks ago. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A better home, a better school, and a safer place to grow up. His mom, Lisa Carter, had made that decision carefully. She wanted what every parent wants: peace, safety, and opportunity for her child. Ethan was a quiet, respectful kid. Loved science, comic books, and basketball. Always basketball. On most afternoons, you could find him outside, dribbling for hours, pretending he was hitting the game-winning shot in the finals. That day was no different. He was in his driveway, lost in the rhythm of the ball bouncing and the feel of the summer breeze. And then it happened, a slightly off bounce, and the ball rolled away from him, across the street, and into a neighbor's yard. He didn't panic. He just jogged after it, still smiling, still bouncing on his toes. As the ball came to a stop near a flower bed, Ethan stopped at the edge of the lawn. He wasn't trying to sneak in. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He did what any polite kid would do. He called out. "Hello," he said gently. "Excuse me, my ball's here." Silence. He waited. Looked around. Listened. Still nothing. The yard was empty. No sign of movement. No voice responding. So, cautiously, he stepped just a few feet into the yard and picked up his basketball. No damage. No harm. No drama. Except, someone had been watching. From the upstairs window, Karen Thompson stood silently, her gaze fixed on the boy in her yard. She didn't see his ball. She didn't hear his voice. She didn't even stop to think. All she saw was a black boy standing where she didn't expect him to be. And instead of asking, instead of stepping outside and saying, "Hey, is everything okay?" she assumed the worst. Her mind raced with fear-fueled thoughts. What's he doing here? Why is he looking around? Is he planning something? Her fears weren't based on fact. They weren't rooted in any evidence. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere far more dangerous. Without a second thought, she grabbed her phone. "Yes, police? There's a suspicious kid in my yard. A black boy. He looks like he's up to something. Can you send someone right away?" The call was made. The wheels were in motion. Ethan, now walking back across the street with his basketball under his arm, heard something unusual. Sirens. Close. Fast. Coming this way. He paused. Turned. And then, in a moment that would change everything, a patrol car pulled up. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, their faces serious. They walked toward him. At first, he thought it was a mistake. A coincidence. But when they stopped in front of him, reality set in. "What are you doing here, son?" one asked, voice calm but firm. Ethan's grip on the basketball tightened. I was just getting my ball," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Before he could explain further, Karen came storming out of her house. "That's him," she shouted, pointing at Ethan like he was a wanted fugitive. He's been snooping around here all day. I told you. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood. The officers turned, surprised by her aggression. Ethan took a step back, scared. The basketball slipped slightly from his hands. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he said, swallowing hard. It rolled over there. I just went to get it. But Karen wasn't backing down. Oh, sure, she said, her voice growing louder, sharper, feeding the whispers around her. That's what they all say. First, it's a ball, then it's a burglary. You don't just wander into people's yards unless you're up to no good. Her words cut deep. Not just into Ethan's spirit, but into the soul of the moment. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The neighbors stayed quiet, watching closely now, unsure of what they were witnessing. Ethan stood there, frozen, silent, too shocked to even cry. In his eyes, the world had turned upside down for doing what any kid would do. And in that moment, what none of them knew was this: Ethan Carter wasn't just an ordinary 12-year-old boy. He was the son of Governor Lisa Carter, the most powerful woman in the state. And she was about to arrive. By the time Ethan turned around, the sirens were already too close. A sharp, high-pitched wail cut through the afternoon calm like a knife. Birds scattered from trees. Curtains shifted as neighbors leaned into their windows. A police car rolled slowly to a stop just feet away from where Ethan stood. 2 officers stepped out, their faces unreadable. Serious. Focused. One of them walked up, hand resting gently on his belt. "What are you doing here, son?" he asked. Not aggressive yet. But not exactly kind either. Ethan blinked. The question didn't make sense. Why were they here? He hugged the basketball tighter against his chest, like it could shield him from whatever was coming. I was just getting my basketball, he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. Before he could respond, the front door of the nearest house swung open with a loud crack. Out stormed Karen Thompson. Her finger already pointed, her words sharp and loud enough for the whole street to hear. "That's him," she shouted. "He's been snooping around my yard all day. I don't care what he says. That boy does not belong in this neighborhood." Her words rang out like sirens of their own. Ethan took a small step back, startled by her intensity. His lips parted slightly, but the words got stuck in his throat. He looked around. People were watching now, from porches, balconies, front lawns. The neighborhood had turned into a stage, and he was standing under the spotlight. The other officer stepped closer to Ethan, brow furrowed. "Were you trespassing?" he asked. Ethan looked down. "I wasn't," he stammered. "I was just getting my ball." It rolled into her yard. Karen crossed her arms, her face twisted with suspicion and indignation. "Oh sure," she snapped, eyes darting between Ethan and the officers. "That's what they always say. First, it's a ball. Next, they're checking out houses to rob. I've seen it before." It felt like a punch to the chest. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, to scream that this wasn't fair, but all he could do was stand there, stunned. He was just a kid. A good kid. And suddenly, he was being treated like a criminal. The whispers around him were getting louder. "He doesn't look dangerous," someone said. "He's just a boy," but no one stepped forward. No one intervened. The tension between Karen's accusations and Ethan's silence filled the space like smoke. One of the officers looked uncomfortable. The other glanced at his partner, then back at the crowd, then back to Ethan. And then, the words came. "You'll need to come with us for questioning." Ethan blinked. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stood there. The world tilted. For what, he thought. I didn't do anything. His hand gripped the basketball tighter, fingertips digging into the seams. His mouth opened, and this time the words barely escaped. Can I call my mom?" The officers paused. One nodded slowly. "Of course. Go ahead." Ethan fumbled for his phone, fingers shaking. He found her contact and pressed call. Ring. Ring. And then Ethan, came the voice on the other end, calm and strong. It was his mother, Lisa Carter. What neither Karen nor the officers knew, not yet, was that this wasn't just a concerned mom on the other end of the line. Lisa Carter was the governor of the entire state. Elected by millions. Respected across the country. Feared by those who underestimated her. But today, she wasn't wearing the title of governor. Today, she was a mother. Mom, Ethan's voice cracked. They think I did something bad. But I didn't. I was just getting my ball. The silence on the other end was cold and controlled. I'll be there, she said. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. But in the next few moments, her world shifted. Calls were made. Security was activated. And within minutes, a fleet of black SUVs, government-issued and surrounded by flashing lights, was tearing down the highway toward the quiet suburban neighborhood. Back on the street, Karen stood near her porch, arms crossed, still holding onto her self-righteous stance. She had no idea what was coming. The officers tried to maintain their composure. But even they could feel it, the storm was building. Ethan stood quietly, the phone still in his hand. But for the first time since the sirens arrived, a flicker of hope crossed his eyes. Because his mom was coming. And the world was about to learn exactly who she was. The moment Governor Lisa Carter picked up the phone and heard her son's trembling voice, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just alarmed, she was lit with fire. Her child was scared. And someone had made him feel like he didn't belong. She stood up from her office chair, no hesitation, no confusion. And within seconds, her staff understood. One call went to her security detail. Another to the state police liaison. A third to her personal driver. This is not a drill, she said, voice calm but hard as steel. Mobilize my motorcade. We're going now. Just 10 minutes later, an entire fleet of black SUVs stormed into the quiet suburban cul-de-sac like a thunderclap. Engines roared. Tires screeched. Flashing lights painted the neighborhood in reds and blues. Doors swung open in unison. Uniformed officers, aides, and agents stepped out with practiced precision. And then out stepped Governor Lisa Carter. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit. Her chin was high. Her stride, unwavering. The street, once filled with murmurs and confusion, felt completely silent. Even the birds seemed to hush. Karen Thompson, who had been standing smugly near her porch just moments earlier, now blinked rapidly in disbelief. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She had no idea who Ethan really was. No idea that her assumptions had just pulled the most powerful woman in the state into her driveway. Governor Carter scanned the scene slowly, every detail noted. 2 officers. A silent crowd. One terrified boy gripping a basketball. Her son. She walked directly toward Ethan. He looked up at her, relief flooding his eyes. For a brief moment, she gently touched his shoulder. It was the only reassurance he needed. Then, her attention snapped toward the officers. Her tone was even, but each word carried weight. What's going on here? The younger officer stepped forward hesitantly. Governor Carter, we received a call about a suspicious individual on private property. Lisa's gaze didn't waver. That suspicious individual is my son. A 12-year-old child. Her eyes shifted, locking onto Karen like a spotlight. You made that call? Karen stuttered. Her earlier confidence was already unraveling. I saw him in my yard, she began. I didn't know who he was. He looked like he was, I thought he might be, dangerous. Lisa didn't blink. Dangerous? She said it like a challenge. Karen nodded, awkwardly folding her arms. Yes. I didn't recognize him, and he looked suspicious. Lisa stepped forward, voice calm but cutting. What made him suspicious? Karen's breath caught. I didn't know him. And, kids like him, they don't usually live around here. They don't just wander into people's yards. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa's expression hardened. Her voice dropped slightly, low, precise, surgical. Kids like him? The weight of those 3 words was enough to make Karen take a half step back. I wasn't trying to say, but Lisa held up a hand. Let me be very clear, she said, eyes narrowing. You called the police on a child. You accused him without speaking to him. You assumed the worst because of how he looked. And now, this entire neighborhood, these officers, and even you, are complicit in a fear that was never based in reality. She turned to the officers. What evidence do you have that my son did anything wrong? Neither man could answer. One looked down. The other shifted uncomfortably. Lisa wasn't done. My son walked into your yard, not to steal, not to vandalize, but to retrieve his basketball. And for that, he was treated like a threat. Karen's voice was barely audible now. I was just trying to protect my property. From what? Lisa shot back. A boy with a ball? A polite child calling out to ask permission? Karen's shoulders sagged. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Some people now turned their eyes away, ashamed. Others looked directly at Karen, no longer with support, but with judgment. Governor Carter took a breath, straightening her shoulders even more. This, she gestured around them, this is what systemic bias looks like. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's dressed in politeness. But it always hurts the same. She turned to Ethan again, her eyes softening only for him. You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. Nothing. Then back to the officers. I expect this to be resolved appropriately. No detainment. No questioning. And most importantly, an apology. The officers both nodded. Yes, Governor. Understood. Lisa took a final step toward Karen, stopping just inches away. Think carefully before you ever make a call like this again, she said. Because next time, you may not just be answering to me. Karen couldn't even respond. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that hangs heavy in the air, pressing down on everyone like a storm cloud that had finally burst. No one in that neighborhood could look away. Not the neighbors watching from behind curtains, their faces pale. Not the officers, now standing with a tension that hadn't been there before, their shoulders heavier with the weight of what had almost happened. And not Karen Thompson, who had just been reminded in front of everyone that the world was watching, and that her actions had consequences. Governor Lisa Carter stepped forward, her voice steady and deliberate. This isn't just about Ethan, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. This is about every black child who's been made to feel like they don't belong, every parent who lies awake at night wondering if their child will come home safely, not because of what they did, but because of what someone thought they might do. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The words sliced through the tension like a blade made of truth. Karen stared at the ground. Her earlier fire, her finger-pointing fury gone. What remained was something more raw, more human. Shame. Her face, once smug and righteous, was now drained of color. Her arms hung limp at her sides. And the neighbors who had once nodded in agreement with her paranoia now looked at her with something else entirely. Distance. Discomfort. Disapproval. Some were finally realizing what they'd been blind to for years. Lisa turned toward the officers once more. I want this resolved. Now. No report. No record. No further questioning. My son deserves better, she said. Then she paused, her voice dropping into something more intimate, more powerful. And so do all the children in this community. The officers nodded in silent agreement. There was no justification left. No excuse they could stand on. Ethan, still clutching his basketball, looked up at his mother with a quiet awe. She hadn't come as a politician today. She'd come as a parent, as his protector. And everyone had seen it. In the days that followed, everything changed. Karen, once so vocal and self-assured, found herself walking through the neighborhood with her head down. People who once waved now turned away. Conversations stopped when she passed. The friendly smiles she was used to had faded into stiff glances and awkward silence. She had become the face of a problem she never realized she embodied. And no one forgot what she said that day, kids like him, but Lisa? She didn't leave the moment behind. She turned it into a mission. She called for a meeting with the local homeowners association. Not as governor, but as a neighbor. She spoke calmly, plainly, but with urgency. She proposed a series of community conversations, workshops on unconscious bias, neighborhood forums, youth-led talks on inclusion and identity. Some resisted at first, but many agreed. Because whether they admitted it or not, they had all felt something shift that day. They saw how easy it was to slip into fear. And they saw what it looked like when someone stood against it. Governor Carter also began working with schools in the district. Bias training for teachers. Mentorship programs. Guest speakers, including young leaders and activists. Her message was clear: we can't fix what we refuse to face. And at the center of this change was Ethan. He didn't stay silent either. Encouraged by his mom, he agreed to speak at his middle school's next assembly. When he walked up to the mic in front of his classmates, teachers, and parents, he held his basketball in one hand, a quiet symbol of how everything had started. "I didn't understand why someone would think I was bad, just because of the way I look," he said, his voice steady but soft. He paused, scanning the room. Every eye was on him. "But now I do. And I know we have to stand up. We have to speak up. We have to be better even when it's uncomfortable. Even when we're scared." The auditorium was silent. And then applause. Not loud, not explosive. But long. Meaningful. From the heart. That moment wasn't about politics. It was about truth. About a boy finding his voice. About a community beginning to reckon with its reflection. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a basketball. It wasn't even just about a neighborhood. Or a governor. Or a woman named Karen who made a wrong call. It was about something deeper. It was about what happens when assumptions go unchecked, when silence becomes complicity, and when power is used not to punish, but to protect. Lisa Carter didn't just defend her son. She challenged a community to look inward. To ask hard questions. To face uncomfortable truths. And Ethan? He didn't just survive the moment. He transformed it. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Share this video to spark the conversation, because together, we can stand for truth, justice, and change. See you in the next one.